let's do this.
Okay. Good morning.
Good morning.
Oh, life, I tell you, life.
So much.
Welcome to the Sun Dragon Sideshow.
The Dear Becky and Lizzy edition.
Yes. I'm trying to... Lots going on for me outside of the shop, so I'm trying to just breathe. Hi, I'm Rebecca. I am the owner of Sun Dragon Art and Fiber in Overcast, and who knows what it's going to do today. Maybe Liz does. Brevard, North Carolina.
It's going to rain, and once we reach our high for the day, it's just going to drop until Saturday morning.
And even though I said your name, who are you?
I'm Liz. I'm the minion there.
Because we got to say that, because people expect that, right? So I feel like I have to hunker in a little from where the camera is, so I moved the microphone over. It's going to rain? Great. That's fantastic.
At some point. Yeah.
That's fantastic. Don't you measure your sleeves in front of me.
Sorry.
She's going to win. So it's a challenge, not a competition. Anyway.
I'm thinking about wearing it on Saturday if I get enough done.
Because it's going to be cold.
It's going to be cold.
Ah. I noticed we can sit out there.
Yeah.
Anyway. Hi. How y'all doing? So, we've already had a couple people buy, like, sweater quantities, basically, of what we have. Like, these two, we don't have enough available. Of the Coastline, which is lovely. I hope you are planning on making the Fading Diamonds cardigan. It's really cool. So, Dear Becky and Lizzy, we get to answer questions today. Let's see what we have on the docket and see how much time we have, since I had to do all this stuff before we started filming.
We're still earlier than normal.
Yeah, well, let's just get to it.
Okay.
Because anxiety, that'll help my anxiety.
So my question is, it's a really dumb question. There are no dumb questions.
There are no dumb questions.
Unless I ask them and then Rebecca laughs at me and still explains it. So
it's still not a dumb question.
Nope.
I just laugh at Liz. It's okay.
When I'm binding off a sock, or I just finished a Sophie scarf in bamboo pop, I get to the very last stitch and cut my yarn and pull the yarn through the loop and tighten it down. And I end up with a knot there. I've tried to loosen it and smooth out and several other futile things. Is there a trick to this? Am I one of those old school knitters and don't know any better? I want it to be smooth like the cast on, and I always end up with this hard lumpy mess. Any suggestions are welcome. Thanks.
Okay, and I forgot to check videos before we went on air, so I'm going to see if I can look this up. I recently came across, I think I know what she's talking about. Often when you bind off, there's a little gap there.
The knot.
Yeah, it looks like a knot.
Okay.
But it's a gap.
Yeah.
And because the gap is there, you feel and see the knot more.
Okay.
Is what I think I'm addressing. And this hat has an example of a hack I have for that. And it's really hard to show from this distance when we're filming. But this is one where I've done my little hack, and here's the bind off. And technically, if you feel there's still a knot. When you pull yarn through a loop, it's a knot.
It's a knot.
That's just, there's no real way around that. What I've done on this one that is smoother than, let's see if it probably wasn't done, and again, the stitching's different on this one. I had Carol bind this one off, and let me see if I can get, she might have tried to do the fancy thing on this too, though. So she did something where it's not the gappiness that I would like to show you of knitting in the round and binding off. So, but there's a thing there that you can try to sew shut, right? But it still leaves a little bit of a gap. I saw a hack on a video, and now I use it all the time, of you finish your bind off, you have one stitch left, and then you go into the first bound off stitch and pick up a stitch. Like go in, you can do it with either needle. But if you're doing the pick up, I teach a pick up and knit type of thing where you can go in with your left needle, so then you can get your right needle in, wrap around and pull up. So then you have two loops, and one is your last what's left from your bind off, and one you've picked up from under the first V you can see from where your bind off started, and you do one more bind off stitch. And then if you pull your yarn through that last loop, you still kind of have a little bit of a nubby knot, but it's not hanging out off to the side. It's right on top of where you started, so it feels more closed. That is the best advice I have. And I was going to look and see if I made a video for that. I may not have, because it was a little thing. I think I probably did it on an Instagram video somewhere, but I have so many videos over on Instagram. I don't know if you're going to be able to find it. If I can find it, I'll try to link it in the description. But I was going to look and see if recently I did a quick, short little hack video. I did closing the end when you have this stuff at the top. I don't think I've made that one, which would be on my list of videos to make, right? I don't think I have a YouTube video for it. If I can find, I would have to really hunt through my Instagram videos because I film every morning. If I can find the one I did on that, I will try to link it as an Instagram post here, because it's a little short hack thing. We have people also asking, hey, are you going to do virtual lessons on the pressed flowers? And I've said it a lot of times, but this person may not, if you don't hit the right moment of our show or our posts, you don't see this, but, or the newsletter, I don't have the capacity for virtual lessons right now. Like we do so many things for the shop. There's not a lot of time and energy left. And I could try to be all things to all people like yarn, and then I'd probably die. Or get very sick. So I would love to be able to have virtual sessions for everybody. The closest I can come is filming my YouTube videos, which take time, and hoping that the series of YouTube videos is enough for the people who are too far away to come in.
You'd need a whole film crew if you were to...
I'd need more than... Yeah, I've done... Like, back at the beginning of the pandemic, I did virtual lessons for up to like 3 people on Zoom, so then I could flip the camera. And there's just extra energy and effort that goes into when you're not there with the person to show them how to do stuff. It's possible, and it kind of works, but it's challenging. And now that the shop is open regular hours, it's very hard to find the time. Like to try to do virtual at the same time as in person, we'd need a film crew for that. We'd need something else we'd need more assistance than we have. So I would love to, but it's not within my means right now. So I'll try to find that video, but I don't know if that makes sense, what I said about trying to like close that gap just a little bit more. There might like... Well, I feel like other than getting... You've got to close that loop somehow. And maybe the direction that you pull your yarn through could be less of a knot, but you still have to sew things shut.
I was feeling the top of my neckline because I start with a slip knot. So I have a knot at the beginning with my cast on, and I have a knot at the end. Mm-hmm. And sometimes you can disguise that knot a bit, but just the art of I never figured out how, and I could, how to start where you just twist your needle into your yarn and just start going without a slip knot. I just find the slip knot easier. And
yeah, I don't use a slip knot when I start.
Yeah.
And it's not too challenging a thing. But yeah, you've got a knot there, right?
Yeah. So like it depends on how you knit. Mm-hmm. And I do the knit one more over to, or pick up one more loop to bind off in the round. But if you're doing it flat,
yeah, and she's not asking about flat.
There was a scarf.
Oh, I thought she was asking about socks
and a scarf.
Okay, I missed that. I'm a little distracted today, and I had a migraine yesterday. So, yeah, when it's flat, that little puckery thing on the end, it's just, you could pick up a stitch back a ways and kind of pull that back over. Like you could reverse bind off by picking it up an extra stitch so it's not just hanging out on the end. But like I was saying before, someone else may have a magical cure out there, but my logic of thinking about it is you are pulling a loop through, like a strand through a loop. It's kind of hard for that knot to be a knot. You kind of have to hide it.
Even when I switch from knitting to crochet on something, mm-hmm. at the end, I still have to pull the string through the loop, even with crochet.
Yeah.
So there's always going to be a knot. It's a thing.
Yeah. So, Anyway, my dad texted me back, and it's just sitting there, like half over Liz's face, so I'll read that when I get. Everything's fine, people-wise. People are fine. I'm dealing with car stuff, so, no one panic that I'm like, oh, my family, and I've got stress, and yeah. Moving on.
We have 2 questions, and we have time for them, so.
Okay.
I have always done a wrap and turn short row, and I hear other people talk about German short rows and some kind of shadow stitch short row. What are the pros and cons of the different methods? I feel like you can always see an extra nub when I wrap and turn, and I don't particularly like that. That's the first one, and I'll read the second one when we've addressed that.
So I'm looking up shadow stitch short row because I don't know it. Shadow Wrap Short Rows Cocoknits has a blog post, so I would check that out. I might skim through it a little bit, but I know that we use the wrap and turn and the German short row, and I find that the regular wrap and turn would always befuddles me, and people consider me an expert. I am not, but I have done a lot of knitting. But I kind of avoid, in stockinette, like when all the V's are on one side and all the bumpies are on the other, I avoid wrap and turn short rows because I don't know how to pick up that wrap. Like, you're slipping a stitch and wrapping it. What you're doing with a short row is a short row you're not knitting all the way across, and you're turning around and going back. And if you just turned around and went back, you'd have a ridge because you'd have an edge. You'd have a bottom stitch and a top stitch. And both of these things, the wrap and turn and the German short row, are doing something with the next stitch so that it has more of a triangular shape than a flat ridge, which will give you a hole. And that's what happens if you accidentally turn around in the middle of your row and go back the other way. You have a hole, and then go, why do I have a hole? When you do it on purpose, you try to camouflage it. And the wrap and turn, you slip this stitch and wrap your yarn around it before you go back. So you're coming over, you wrap around, and you come back. And this stitch is unworked, but it's been wrapped around. But when you come back to go across everything, that if you leave that wrap, you definitely have a bump. If you pick it up and knit it together with the slip stitch, it hides it better. But if you don't slide it in the right way, it gets all gobbledygooky. And I can't tell you how to do that because I've never properly learned, or I feel like I'm always doing it wrong.
I can't ever figure out how to pick up the wrap.
Yeah, and not have it show somewhere. German short rows, you actually work this stitch. You knit it or purl it depending on what side you're on, and then you lift it up, you slide it over the needle when you turn it around. I have a video for that. And you end up with these linked stitches that give you a little X at the top. And when you come back to them, you just knit or purl through the center of that knotty looking thing. And to me, that is as smooth as I can get it. Mm-hmm. Like, you can see it more on one side. I think it's like the purl side. Like when you're doing them coming from a purl direction to a knit, it shows up a little better, or shows up not as smoothly. But to me, it looks better than a wrap and turn.
Well,
or it's easier to find and deal with and whatever.
We've both settled into if you're doing something in garter, we'll use a wrap and turn because you don't have to pick up the wrap because it hides in all those garter ridges, like the papillon. I don't ever use a German short row in the papillon because the little wrap and turns from the short rows, they hide just in the bumps, so you can't even tell. Even on my supersized papillon, like they're just kind of all hidden in there. If it's something like sleeves or a sweater where it needs to look like stockinette, we use the German short row because it just cleans up that side.
So the shadow stitch looks like it might be cleaner. I'm looking at Cocoknits. I will say with the German short row, there are some tips and tricks to make that work right, and I have videos on my tips and tricks channel for that. The shadow stitch looks like knit to where you are instructed to turn a short row. Before you turn, they're calling it a KRL into the next stitch on your needle. I think it's like a lifted increase, basically. By lifting the right arm of the stitch directly below the one on your needle. Place this new loop on your left needle. And we're not doing it for you, but knit the new loop so it becomes a stitch. immediately pass that new stitch back to the left needle so it sits in the shadow. So you're pulling up I feel like you're pulling up, you're not actually doing an increase, you're just pulling up the loop and you're knitting into it then and putting it over there. So you've made an extra stitch right over here. And they're calling it its shadow. And then turn your work and purl back. So it stays. You've put it over here and you turn your work around, it stays over on the other side. When you work back to the shadow wrap on the right side and need to close your short row, you knit the 2 shadow stitches together. So it's like the German short row. Instead of yanking yarn over your needle and creating this crisscross, you have done something where you're still closing that triangle. You're putting an extra thing in there so there's no hole. And then when you come back to it, you're combining it with the stitch that was already there.
It half sounds like a jogless join for color work.
Kind of.
For some of the color work.
Kind of. Yeah. The jogless join is usually slipping or lifting a leg and knitting together. This is lifting a leg and knitting into that leg and then knitting. Yeah. So it's, variations on a theme, kind of. That was on the right side. There's a different thing on the wrong side. Cocoknits has a tutorial. I would say for now, since I haven't tried it, go check out Cocoknit's tutorial. They have a step-by-step with, if I can remember, I'll put this in the description. They have a step-by-step with pictures and they have a video. I'm not clicking on the video right now. But that sounds like it's fairly invisible. And it's any of these can be interchanged. Like if there's a pattern that says wrap and turn, you can stick one of these other versions in. If it says German short row, you can flip-flop these out. It's like when you're doing small circumference knitting. If it says double points, you can use 2 circulars. Like, there's no reason not to. You don't have to be like, but it says I need to do this. I would imagine that especially because Cocoknits likes it. I trust Cocoknits on a lot of things, just because I love how they've designed all of their gadgets and gizmos that we have. I would think the shadow stitch might be the best option if you really want things to be invisible. However, I have not tried it. That's my disclaimer. I use a German short row for stockinette. I use wrap and turn for garter when, like Liz was saying, where it can be hidden and I don't have to worry about it. So.
And it's the ones we feel comfortable with. Yeah. So, Yeah. Part 2. When I do a crochet chain provisional cast on, I can never just rip out like I think I'm supposed to. Am I doing something wrong?
Okay, that one from my experience, I have had times when I've done the crochet provisional cast on of going over my needle and making with the crochet hook and making loops and things in the past where I've thought I've done it right and it didn't work to pull out. But I have not scientifically dissected that enough to know why. So I hear you. It has happened to me. It has not happened to me recently. And I don't know if it's the direction that the hook is going over the needle, or the way that you're wrapping the yarn over the hook. I really couldn't tell you. I want to say, I'm just grabbing random things that are here to see if I can suss out how I do stuff. These are your needles. That's fine. I'm just going to take something. It's, and I'm not going to be able to do enough right now to test and tell you why it's not working. So, sometimes it can be as easy as you're not pulling out on the wrong side, the correct end of the chain. But I've had times when I've marked out which is the correct end and it's gotten stuck and I have to cut it out. And that is, get little teeny tiny scissors. That's why it's important to do your provisional cast on in a yarn that's different than the yarn you're knitting with, so you can see if you have to cut it out, what you do. So I cross my crochet hook over my needle. What I'm going to say, it might be, is for crochet chains to really work, I wanted to see if I was still doing this the same way that I crochet. One of the differences that Liz and I have noticed between knitting and crochet is regular knit stitches, you wrap the yarn counterclockwise around your needle. And crochet, am I doing this right? Let me see. You wrap your yarn clockwise. And as I'm sitting here and doing this, so if you're a knitter, you are so used to wrapping your yarn counterclockwise, this way, up from the bottom up over. That you may do that with your crochet hook when you're doing your provisional cast on, because that's the muscle memory. And that's one of the only things I can think. Again, I haven't tested this. The way that your yarn is wrapped and looped through might change how it pulls out. Because I'm doing this where I hold the crochet hook at 90 degrees above the needle, and my muscle memory for crochet, I'm lifting it over the top of the crochet hook to pull it through. And I'm wondering if, because that I would think would orient the loops in a different way than if I did what I'm used to doing with knitting. It feels really weird to loop it over from bottom to top. But I'm wondering if looping it over in a different direction and pulling it through, so it's sitting in a different orientation on your needle, actually affects how, when you go to pull it out, if it pulls out cleanly or not. I don't know. I could be totally talking out of my butt because I haven't tested it enough. But that's one of the things I would check is, how are you doing your provisional cast on? Some people do provisional cast on where they make a chain and then they knit into the back bumps. And I don't, in theory, that should pull out the same way.
But if you catch
the wrong strand.
Well, if you catch just a piece of the strand where you're actually knitting through the strands of your crochet, so yarn is weird sometimes.
If I have time, I will test these things. But since we don't even have time for virtual classes, I don't know if I'm going to have time to test these things. But those are my thoughts on why that might be happening, is to really examine how you are wrapping your crochet hook if you're putting your crochet hook over your needle. Like, how is your provisional cast on happening? And you can check out the videos that I've made, because I'm pretty sure since I started really thinking about how I was doing it and mapped it out and filmed it, I don't think I've ever had a problem pulling out I've always been terrified that I'll pull and it won't come out. But, and sometimes the very last one gets tangled. Like knitting the very last one, it doesn't come out cleanly, but then you're back to your tail, and hopefully that one will come out okay. Yeah. So I find when I'm pulling out my provisional cast on, because I need loops to sew to loops, sometimes that last loop that was knit into the provisional cast on, I have to make sure I don't lose. I'm like, that's not a loop. I can, and then it is one I needed. My count is off. So that's another thing I found happening. Like the loops hanging under your work when you release them from your provisional cast on are going in a different direction than the loops that you're coming up with as you're knitting, and so there's some wibbly wobbly there too. So I think we had to end very abruptly yesterday, so maybe we can wrap up nicely today. We still have time left, but I also think my brain is like very distracted. Down. It's not quite melting down. That was yesterday. But it's super distracted, which could have the same appearance. So
it's Jell-O. Bleh. It's not melty.
And I got to see what my dad said and get back to him, because I probably have to explain things. So, Anyway, so this is the last day of this week. Hopefully, I might be wearing a sweater with the needles still in it on Tuesday. But I couldn't do any knitting yesterday because of my migraine. I went home and thought I could do some knitting, and I couldn't. So we'll see if my sweater is done for Tuesday. I think Liz's sweater is going to be done for Tuesday. You think it might even be done for Saturday.
I'm going to try for Saturday.
But it's
Tuesday,
nice to have
definitely.
the challenge, because hopefully my sweater will get done. Because then I can work on my pressed flowers cardigan. That'll be fun. Anyway, we have virtual sit and stitch tomorrow night from 7 to 9 p.m. You can get into Zoom with the shop phone number.
828-877-3550.
I have my pressed flowers hat and cowl. I have my pressed flowers hat and cowl class this Saturday in person. We have one spot left in the class. And then we have in-person sit and stitch Saturday afternoon. It's going to probably be a rainy, crappy day. But if anyone wants to come in the afternoon, and if the stage is free, we'll be hanging out, trying to be sheltered from the rain. And then we don't have sit and stitch on Sunday, because the sit and stitch for April is like the 23rd.
It's in 2 Sunday. Not this Sunday, not next Sunday, the Sunday
2
after.
weeks from Sunday.
Yeah.
But then we'll have virtual sit and stitch on Tuesday night again. So join us if you can. Come by the shop if you're able. Email us. Say hi. Say hi in the comments here. You know, all that good stuff. The kits are running low for the shawls, and I'll rebuild them as I can. I'm still waiting for more feeder brook to come in. I might try making some kits out of some other yarn. We shall see. I got to see what I have energy for and headspace for.
Filling out my Post-it note for you, I realized I started making my boxes
like
Saturday,
flowers?
a year ago Saturday, and it's for a couple of years. I'm like, I'm gonna start making the boxes, and I'm like, all shop expense. Yeah.
But some of that didn't make sense to my brain, but I'll talk to her off camera about it.
It's all the yarn I pulled out of the system for the boxes.
Okay. All right, yeah, because we need to start making Surprise Me Sale Bin support boxes for the crawl. The Western North Carolina yarn crawl is coming up in the second week of May. All the shops in Western North Carolina will be having sales and fun things, and most of that's in-house. Last year we might have had a small online sale while the crawl was going on, and then we did bigger sales afterwards for y'all who can't come visit. But it's hard to do the same things we're doing in shop for online people. It really is about people who are visiting the shop. And then we'll try to have something special for y'all after that, if you can't come visit. Because we know we're your local yarn store from far away for many people. So we'll do what we can. But we're not yarn, so we can't be all things to all people. So we are almost to 1460 in subscribers. We are inching our way towards 1500, which is the next time we will have a sale. It won't be quite as big as our 1,000-person sale, because that was a mega sale. But we'll try to make it good for you. So if you haven't subscribed, please consider subscribing. If you'd like to support the shop but you don't need yarn, you can go to patreon.com/sundragon and pick something there. And after 3 months, you get some swag from Patreon. And your name in the credits at the end of this thing here. And I don't know, is there anything else? Ring the bell, all the good stuff?
Ring the bell, all the good stuff. Yeah.
So, comment on the video if you liked it, or if you have a question or something like that. And the algorithms will go, people are paying attention.
If you have a question for Dear Becky and Lizzy, email liz@sundragonartandfiber.com.
That's where it goes.
Don't leave it as a question.
Because we might lose track of it then.
In the comments. If you have a question about the show or, but if it's specifically for Dear Becky and Lizzy, email me. So.
Okay. Love y'all. Talk to you later.
Bye.